The locker room doors are bolted shut, but the tension is leaking out. Elite veteran starters are officially staging a revolt against Shedeur Sanders, claiming his leadership style has crossed the line into total control. Is this an uncompromising quest for a championship, or is Shedeur burning the program down from the inside? Behind the scenes, the friction has transformed routine summer walkthroughs into psychological warfare. Players who spent years building their reputations in the professional ranks now find themselves pushed to the absolute edge by a young signal caller who refuses to yield an inch. The silence in the facility speaks louder than any public statement ever could, pointing toward a fractured locker room on the brink of an all-out civil war. What was supposed to be a seamless transition into a championship era has instead exposed a deep, ideological divide that threatens to destroy the team's chemistry before the first official kickoff. When Shedeur Sanders stepped into the league, analysts unanimously praised his poise, his mechanical accuracy, and his uncanny pocket presence under pressure. He was framed as the ultimate modern quarterback, a modern passer capable of elevating everyone around him. But behind the scenes, Shedeur was never going to be content with simply earning a spot on the roster or waiting his turn in the traditional hierarchy. He wanted total control of the system, complete authority over the offense, and the absolute power to dictate how every single play was executed down to the smallest detail. What started as high expectations and a passionate drive to win quickly morphed into something far more intense and uncompromising. It became a hyper-exacting regime where every single route, every boundary step, and every split-second decision was microanalyzed under a microscope. Shedeur transformed almost overnight from a promising young prospect into a rigid, unyielding locker room enforcer who viewed anything short of perfection as a personal insult to his work ethic. This evolution didn't happen by accident. It was built on the foundation of what insiders now call the Sanders Standard. Under this philosophy, there is no such thing as an off-season period for adjustment, nor is there any tolerance for summer rust. Voluntary July workouts and casual throwing sessions are treated with the exact same high-stakes intensity as a high-stakes fourth-quarter drive in the middle of November. If a wide receiver breaks off a route half a yard short of the marker during an unpadded practice, the entire play is brought to a screeching halt. If a veteran offensive lineman misreads a defensive front or misses a protection check at the line during routine drills, Shedeur stops the session cold and forces the entire unit to reset the sequence from the beginning. There are no handshakes, no polite reminders, and no letting things slide until training camp. The Sanders Standard is built on a zero-tolerance policy for human error, creating an environment where every repetition feels like an evaluation and every movement is subjected to constant, suffocating surveillance. For the younger guys on the roster who are desperate to make a name for themselves and secure a roster spot, that relentless drive can be contagious. They see a young star willing to push himself and everyone else to the absolute limits of their abilities. But for established veterans who have spent years in the league, who have weathered grueling seasons, and who understand the delicate physical pacing required to survive a 17-game calendar, this policy feels completely suffocating. It feels less like inspirational leadership and more like authoritarian control imposed by someone who has yet to prove himself over the long haul of an NFL career. The fundamental clash lies in the perception of the work. Where Shedeur sees necessary operational precision, the veterans see an ego-driven dictator refusing to respect the physical reality of professional football. Shedeur's complete refusal to accept anything less than flawless execution is actively alienating the old guard. These are players who have built their entire careers on personal responsibility, professional autonomy, and mutual respect among peers. They do not believe they need to be micromanaged like rookies during voluntary summer sessions, nor do they appreciate having their professional pride challenged every time a pass falls incomplete. By treating established stars with the same rigid, unyielding discipline he applies to raw, undrafted free agents, Shedeur has eroded the unspoken social contract that typically keeps a locker room together. The old guard views his leadership style not as a quest for excellence, but as a total lack of empathy and respect for those who came before him. As the temperature rises both on and off the field, the gap between the quarterback and his veteran core continues to widen into an unbridgeable chasm. Shedeur's insistence on imposing his authority without compromise has created an atmosphere thick with unspoken resentment. Every drill becomes a battle of wills. Every corrected route becomes a line drawn in the sand. And every quiet moment in the locker room reflects a growing rebellion that is rapidly spinning out of control. The stage is officially set for a massive collision between a quarterback who demands absolute submission and a group of veteran players who refuse to be humbled. The quiet resistance that had been brewing in the corners of the training facility rapidly transformed into an open, undeniable revolt. The breaking point didn't occur under the blinding lights of a packed stadium, nor did it break out during a heated team meeting with coaches present. Instead, it unfolded on the scorching, sun-baked practice fields during voluntary summer throwing sessions. Key veteran starters, men who have spent years earning their stripes, earning multi-million-dollar contracts, and mastering the subtle pacing required to navigate a grueling professional season, began to quietly make a statement through their absence. What started as one or two high-profile wide receivers skipping Shedeur Sanders' private, self-mandated afternoon workouts quickly morphed into an organized, full-scale boycott that left the quarterback throwing to practice squad players and eager rookies desperate to make an impression. These established stars did not simply take the day off to rest. They made a calculated choice to publicly distance themselves from their quarterback's sphere of influence. Rather than submitting to Shedeur's non-negotiable summer schedule and high-strung, uncompromising demands, several veteran leaders organized their own independent off-site training sessions miles away from the main facility. They hired their own private specialists, ran their own route trees, and set their own tempo, sending a crystal-clear message through the league grapevine. They were more than willing to put in the grueling physical work required to get ready for the upcoming season, but they were flatly refusing to do it under the watchful, hypercritical eye of a young passer who treated every missed step like a punishable offense against his authority. This physical walkout exposed a massive, ideological fault line running directly through the heart of the roster. Professional football locker rooms have historically operated under an unwritten, deeply respected seniority hierarchy. Respect, leadership privileges, and the right to hold others accountable are traditional currencies earned through years in the trenches, body sacrifice, and proven performance under extreme pressure. Shedeur Sanders completely shattered that long-standing dynamic overnight, replacing decades of locker room tradition with an uncompromising performance-based meritocracy. In Shedeur's worldview, previous accolades, veteran tenure, and massive salary caps mean absolutely nothing if a player is not executing with flawless NFL-level precision right now in the middle of July. To the veteran core, this philosophy feels like a direct assault on the mutual respect that holds professional teams together. It completely disregards the physical reality of veteran bodies and the unspoken agreement that experienced players know how to prepare themselves for the marathon of a regular season. Details leaked from private group text threads and closed-door player-only meetings paint a vivid picture of deep, boiling resentment. Established pros are openly voicing their frustration, asking each other how a young player with limited professional reps can reasonably demand total submission from men who have been excelling at the highest level for nearly a decade. The clash between old-school seniority and Shedeur's aggressive meritocracy has turned routine summer preparation into an intense, uncomfortable war of attrition. The tension has completely eroded the natural camaraderie that typically binds an offense together during the dark months of the off-season. In these private text groups, where coaches have no visibility and media access is strictly blocked, the language used by veterans is no longer cautious or polite. Players are actively encouraging one another to hold the line, warning younger teammates against blindly submitting to what they view as a toxic, ego-driven dictatorship. The shared consensus among the old guard is that leadership cannot be seized through intimidation or endless demands. It must be offered willingly by a locker room that trusts its caller. By demanding complete compliance without earning that foundational trust first, Shedeur has backed his veteran teammates into a corner where falling in line feels like a humiliating surrender of their professional dignity. As the summer weeks tick away, the separation between the quarterback and his most talented offensive weapons continues to widen into a dangerous void. The practice fields, once meant to be a proving ground for building timing, chemistry, and trust, have instead become a symbolic monument to a team divided against itself. Shedeur stands at one end of the complex with a small group of compliant followers, while his top targets sharpen their skills across town, completely disconnected from the man who is supposed to lead them into battle. The Great Divide is no longer just a subtle difference in philosophy or a minor disagreement over summer schedules. It is an active, deeply personal mutiny that threatens to split the entire organization in two before training camp even officially opens. The breakdown in trust didn't remain confined to field work or secret group chats. It bled directly into the film room, turning what should have been routine tactical study into a volatile war zone. In professional football, the film room is traditionally a sacred space, a classroom designed for constructive critique, self-correction, and collective growth. But under Shedeur Sanders' leadership, film sessions turned into public trials. Reports surfaced that Shedeur took remote control of the projector, routinely stopping the tape to single out established veteran teammates in front of the entire offensive unit. He didn't just highlight systemic breakdowns, he paused on individual frames, relentlessly interrogating multi-million-dollar receivers over a quarter-step deviation in their route depth, or calling out veteran offensive linemen for a split-second delay in identifying a blitz pickup. For players who had spent 5, 7, or 10 years in the league building their reputations and perfecting their craft, this public humiliation broke every unwritten rule of the locker room. In professional sports, holding players accountable is the job of the coaching staff. When a young quarterback takes it upon himself to act as judge, jury, and executioner in front of raw rookies and practice squad guys, it strips veteran leaders of their authority and professional pride. The atmosphere inside those film sessions grew so heavy that players began entering the room with their guard completely up, bracing for impact rather than focusing on scheme installation. What was intended to enforce absolute precision instead cultivated deep defensive resentment, transforming teammates into guarded adversaries actively looking for opportunities to point the finger back at their quarterback. The humiliation factor didn't stop within the four walls of the facility. It leaked out onto social media and sports talk ecosystems, nuclear charging the internal strain. Cryptic posts, highlighted practice clips, and subtle online commentary began circulating across major platforms, feeding an insatiable media machine hungry for locker room drama. Fans and media analysts quickly began picking sides, dissecting every clip to decide whether Shedeur was an uncompromising winner surrounded by lazy veterans or an ego-driven diva destroying team chemistry from within. For the veterans involved, the public court of opinion added a layer of psychological pressure that went far beyond football. They weren't just defending their route trees, they were defending their professional legacies against an army of online critics emboldened by the narrative their quarterback helped project. This constant threat of exposure turned what should have been a unified offense into a hyper-competitive, every-man-for-himself war of survival. Instead of building unit chemistry and trust during the crucial summer months, players were driven into survival mode. Receivers ran routes not out of a shared vision for making plays, but out of fear of becoming the next target of an uncomfortable film breakdown. Linemen blocked with an underlying anxiety over how their technique would be analyzed under the spotlight of Shedeur's microscope. The psychological strain created a toxic cycle of hypervigilance, where making a mistake was treated as a personal failure rather than a natural part of physical preparation. The impact on the mental psyche of these established players has been devastating to the team's overall health. Professional athletes rely heavily on confidence, instinct, and smooth execution. When every single snap is executed under the looming threat of public callouts and relentless peer surveillance, fluid instinct is replaced by hesitation. Veterans with legitimate professional aspirations and contract extensions on the line found themselves second-guessing their every move, caught in a mental gridlock. The trust between passer and target, which takes years of shared struggle to forge, was replaced by a transactional, hypercritical dynamic that left everyone exhausted. As July draws toward a close, the film room remains a daily reminder of a fractured locker room. What was supposed to be a tool for collective improvement has transformed into the primary stage for a battle of egos. Shedeur's refusal to pull back on his aggressive accountability methods has left his veteran teammates feeling completely alienated and exposed. The public humiliation factor didn't produce a roster of disciplined, infallible soldiers. It created a divided locker room filled with proud veterans who are now fully prepared to revolt rather than endure another session under their quarterback's thumb. As the internal mutiny escalates from silent workouts into full-blown organizational tension, the coaching staff finds itself trapped on an extremely dangerous tightrope. Head coaches and offensive coordinators live in a world governed by a single, brutal metric: winning games. On paper, every signal caller trainer dreams of having a quarterback who eats, sleeps, and breathes football, a ruthless competitor who demands absolute perfection and holds everyone in the building accountable. But in the modern landscape of high-stakes football, there is a razor-thin line between a passionate franchise leader and a divisive figure who alienates the very talent required to construct a winning team. The coaching leadership is caught directly between two massive colliding forces. On one side stands their young star quarterback, a transcendent talent whose relentless work ethic and high-intensity approach represent the future of the program. On the other side sits a group of proud, established veteran starters, the bedrock of the roster, the men who anchor the offensive line, run the complex route concepts, and maintain the defensive front line. If the staff steps in and publicly forces Shedeur Sanders to dial back his intensity, they risk neutering his greatest asset, his competitive fire. They risk making him feel unsupported, creating a rift with the heart of their offense. But if they stand by silently and allow his uncompromising dictatorship to continue unchecked, they risk watching the entire locker room disintegrate before a single regular season snap is taken. Behind closed doors, the coaching staff is engaged in frantic damage control. Private conversations, quiet meetings in corner offices, and strategic media appearances are being deployed to manage the narrative and soothe bruised egos. Staff members are desperately trying to reframe Shedeur's rigid demands as simple passion, reassuring disgruntled veterans that their hard-earned status is still respected within the organization. Yet, these diplomatic efforts are falling on deaf ears. The veteran players are not blind to the power dynamics at play. They see how the franchise protects its star quarterback, and whispers of favoritism are growing louder with each passing day, threatening to completely dissolve what little trust remains between the players and the front office. This growing perception of institutional favoritism carries catastrophic risks for roster management. In an era defined by player empowerment, contract flexibility, and immediate trade demands, no veteran feels forced to endure an environment they view as toxic or disrespectful. Key starters on both sides of the ball are quietly making their leverage known. Offensive linemen who routinely put their bodies on the line to keep the pocket clean, along with veteran wideouts who demand target share, are privately hinting at trade requests or off-season contract disputes. They are making it crystal clear to decision-makers that if the culture remains dictated solely by Shedeur's demands, they will happily seek opportunities elsewhere. The ripple effects of this tension extend far beyond the active roster. The threat of key defensive leaders and frontline offensive linemen walking away or checking out mentally leaves the front office staring into an abyss of roster volatility. Building a competitive team requires depth, experience, and cohesion, elements that cannot be replaced overnight if a wave of core contributors decides to step away. If the coaching staff fails to bridge this chasm immediately, they face the nightmare scenario of entering a high-pressure season with a completely gutted infrastructure, leaving their star passer isolated behind an inexperienced, unproven unit. The staff now faces an agonizing, career-defining crossroad. They must decide whether to intervene directly and impose strict boundaries on their quarterback's leadership style, or prepare to overhaul the roster around players who are willing to submit to his vision without question. There are no safe choices remaining on the board. Trying to appease both sides has only deepened the divide, leaving the organization teetering on the brink of an all-out civil war. As training camp approaches, the coaching staff is running out of time to regain control of a locker room that is rapidly slipping through their fingers. This high-stakes collision inside the organization represents the ultimate gamble in modern sports. Is this destructive friction a necessary fire required to forge a championship team, or is it a recipe for an unprecedented, catastrophic collapse? History is filled with legendary leaders whose relentless, uncompromising style pushed teammates to their absolute limits. Icons like Tom Brady, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan were notorious for creating uncomfortable, high-pressure environments where mediocrity was relentlessly hunted down and eradicated. They did not ask for permission to lead, nor did they care about preserving the feelings of established teammates. They demanded total alignment with their obsessive standard of perfection, operating under the firm belief that true competitive greatness cannot be achieved through polite consensus or passive comfort. When that ruthless mentality works, it creates an ironclad culture of excellence that dismantles opposing teams and builds enduring dynasties. The intense pressure burns away weakness, forcing every individual on the roster to elevate their game to an elite level. But there is a razor-thin line between a transformative, high-intensity leader and an alienating force that completely destroys a team's foundation from within. For every historic success story forged in the fires of internal conflict, there are dozens of talented teams that imploded before ever reaching their potential. When a leader demands absolute submission without first establishing deep mutual trust and collective buy-in, the intensity stops feeling like a pursuit of greatness and begins to feel like toxic self-sabotage. As the summer days dwindle and the official start of training camp draws near, the organization stands directly at a monumental fork in the road. The looming deadline leaves no remaining room for passive avoidance or quiet boycotts. The veteran starters, who have spent weeks holding the line against Shedeur Sanders' authority, must make a final, career-defining decision. They can choose to swallow their pride, set aside their deep-seated resentment, and fall in line behind their young quarterback's vision for the team. Alternatively, they can officially push the big red button, demanding trade requests, forcing releases, or stepping away from the program entirely, leaving the offense fractured and depleted on the eve of the regular season. Shedeur Sanders is putting everything on the line, staking his entire reputation and early career legacy on this uncompromising brand of leadership. By refusing to bend, soften his approach, or offer olive branches to the old guard, he has stripped away any possibility of a comfortable middle ground. If his iron-fisted approach unites the roster into a disciplined, dominant machine, his actions will be celebrated as the genius blueprint of a generational winner. But if the veteran mutiny spills over into the regular season, leading to missed assignments, broken plays, and a divided locker room, the blame will land squarely at his feet. The ultimate gamble has been placed, the clock is ticking down to zero, and the entire football world is watching to see whether Shedeur Sanders is forging a championship contender or burning his own program down to the ground. Video description. The locker room doors are bolted shut, but the internal tension is leaking out. Is Shedeur Sanders forging an elite culture of perfection, or is his uncompromising leadership style burning the locker room down from the inside? In this deep dive investigative breakdown, we expose the escalating friction as NFL veteran starters quietly stage a boycott against Shedeur's high-intensity summer throwing sessions. From unwritten locker room codes to zero-tolerance film study callouts, discover why established stars are choosing off-site independent training over total submission to their young quarterback.